One of the most ruthless events of the Tudor period saw a Queen of Scotland make her way to the executioner's scaffold inside the walls of Fotheringhay Castle. Elizabeth I signed the death warrant of Mary Queen of Scots after Mary had got herself embroiled in a number of plots to get rid of the English Queen Elizabeth and to put herself on the throne of England. It was the Babington plot which was the last straw for the Tudor Queen, as Elizabeth was then convinced to sign her death warrant, and because of this Mary was informed that her execution was to take place the very next day inside the walls of Fotheringhay Castle, a place she had been imprisoned for a while. But things did not go well with the execution of Mary, as the executioner botched the proceedings. However, after her death, her heart and entrails, along with vital organs, were allegedly removed during the embalming process, and it's believed that these were placed in a lead casket and then were buried inside the walls of Fotheringhay Castle, behind the very rooms where she lost her head. Join us today to look at the heart of Mary Queen of Scots, and as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. It was very normal following the death of royals for their bodies to be embalmed, and then the vital organs to be removed and cut out. Jane Seymour, the third wife of King Henry VIII, had her heart taken out following her death inside of Hampton Court Palace. Her body was buried inside of a burial vault in St George's Chapel within the walls of Windsor Castle, but her heart was then buried underneath the altar of the Chapel Royal inside Hampton Court some miles away. The removal of the heart after death was also used not too long ago in the past, as the novelist Thomas Hardy had his heart removed after death. This was then buried with his former wife, with his body being buried elsewhere. But the heart of Mary Queen of Scots has never been found, but it is not known if it has been looked for. On the 8th of February 1587, Mary Queen of Scots was taken into the Great Hall of Fotheringhay Castle for her execution, as she had been told the night before that she was to lose her head. One account of her execution exists, and it states, her, Mary Queen of Scots, prayers being ended, the executioners kneeling, desired her grace to forgive them her death, who answered, I forgive you with all my heart, for now I hope you shall make an end to all my troubles. Then they with her two women, helping her up, began to disrobe her of her apparel. Then she, laying her crucifix upon the stool, one of the executioners took from the neck the Agnus Dei, which she, laying her hands off it, gave it to one of her women, and told the executioner he should be answered money for it. Then she suffered them, with her two women, to disrobe her of her chain of pomander beads, and all other apparel, most willingly, and with joy rather than sorrow, helped make them ready herself, putting on a pair of sleeves with her own hands, which they had pulled off, and that with some haste, as if she had longed to be gone. All this time they were pulling off her apparel. She never changed her countenance, but with smiling cheer she uttered these words, that she had never had such grooms to make her unready, that she had never put off her clothes before such a company. Then she, being stripped of all her apparel, saving her petticoat and kirtle, her two women beholding her, made great lamentation and crying, and crossing themselves prayed in Latin. She, turning herself to them, embracing them, said some words in French, and so crossing and kissing them, bade them pray for her, and rejoice and not weep, for that now they should see an end of all their mistress's troubles. Then she, with a smiling countenance, turning to her manservants, as Melvin and the rest, standing upon a bench nigh the scaffold, who sometime weeping, sometime crying out aloud, and continually crossing themselves, prayed in Latin, crossing them with her hand, bade them farewell, and wishing them to pray for her, even until the last hour. This done, one of the women, having a Corpus Christi cloth, lapped up three corner ways, kissing it, put it over the Queen of Scots' face, and pinned it fast to the caul of her head. Then the two women departed her, and she, kneeling down upon the cushion most resolutely, without any token of fear or death, she spake aloud this psalm in Latin, In te Domine confido, non cufidar in aeternum. Then, groping for the block, she laid down her head, putting her chin over the block, with both her hands, which, holding there still, had been cut off if they not had been espied. Then, lying upon the block most quietly, and stretching out her arms, cried, In manus tuus Domine, 3 or 4 times. Then she, lying very still upon the block, one of the executioners holding her slightly with one of his hands, she endured 2 strokes of the other executioner with an axe, she making very small noise or none at all, and not stirring any part of her from the place where she lay. And so the executioner cut off her head, saving one little gristle, which being cut asunder, he lifted up her head to the view of all the assembly, and bade God save the Queen. Then her dress of lawn falling from off her head, it appeared as grey as one of 70 years old, polled very short, her face in a moment being so much altered from the form she had when she was alive, as few could remember her by her dead face. Her lips stirred up and down a quarter of an hour after her head was cut off. Then Mr. Dean, Dr. Fletcher, Dean of Peterborough, said with a loud voice, "So perish all the Queen's enemies." And afterwards the Earl of Kent came to the dead body, and standing over it, with a loud voice said, "Such end of all the Queen's and the Gospel's enemies." Then one of the executioners, pulling off her garters, espied her little dog, which was crept under her clothes, which could not be gotten forth but by force, yet afterwards would not depart from the dead corpse, but came and lay between her head and her shoulders, which being imbued with the blood, was carried away and washed, as were all things else that had any blood was either burned or washed clean, and the executioners sent away with money for their fees, not having any one thing that belonged unto her. And so every man being commended out of the hall, except the sheriff and his men, she was carried by them up into a great chamber, lying ready for the surgeons to embalm her. Inside of the chambers and rooms inside Fotheringhay Castle, where Mary's body was taken to, she was embalmed. She was laid out inside of this room for many months after this was done, as Elizabeth I could not decide where to bury her, as she instantly regretted the decision to execute Mary. During the embalming process, a number of Mary's vital organs were removed, including her intestines and her heart. It was claimed that these were then placed inside of a casket or a box, and that they were then buried nearby within the grounds of the castle. This would lead to the conclusion that still today, buried under the grass, where some of the former buildings stood within the bailey of the castle, the heart of Mary Queen of Scots may still be there. One other possibility is that there was a chapel inside the bailey, but also in a separate building away from the keep on top of the hill, that Mary's heart may have been kept near to the altar of the chapel. Little exists of the castle today, but the heart of Mary Queen of Scots was said to have been buried nearby, and this would have been a relic which Elizabeth I hoped would be lost and forgotten. Anything that belonged to Mary was burned in the fire of Fotheringhay's Great Hall shortly after her execution, and this was to prevent relics being taken. There is a possibility though today that the heart of Mary Queen of Scots may have been located by someone or a local and has been moved elsewhere, but this has not been documented, and if ever found, the heart of Mary Queen of Scots, or even the vessel that held it, may be one of the most valuable Catholic relics found in Europe. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.